The horrible way. Victorian women used the toilet in those giant dresses you can't breathe. Your ribs are being crushed inward by steel and whalebone, each shallow gasp a small victory against the corset cutting into your flesh. Around you, 30 pounds of fabric, wire, and lace swing like a pendulum with every step. A cage you cannot escape, a monument to beauty you cannot shed. And then you feel it. That primal, undeniable urge. Nature doesn't care about your silk gown or your steel hoops, or the fact that you're standing in a ballroom surrounded by 200 people who would be scandalized into silence if they knew what you were about to attempt. You have perhaps 10 minutes. The clock is ticking. And removing this architectural miracle you're wearing? Impossible. Before we dive into one of history's most fascinating and frankly shocking survival stories, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. It genuinely amazes me that we can connect across continents to uncover these hidden chapters of human ingenuity together. This is the reality no history book prepared you for. This is the daily battle Victorian women fought in absolute silence, with breathtaking creativity and zero room for error. This is how they survived in dresses that could shelter a family, and why their solutions will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about grace under pressure. The year is 1856. London is at the height of its obsession with the crinoline, a cage-like structure of steel hoops that can span 6 feet in diameter, transforming women into living sculptures of fabric and framework. But here's what the paintings don't show you. That magnificent silhouette came with a price that had to be paid multiple times a day, in absolute secrecy, with the kind of strategic planning usually reserved for military operations. Let's start with the architecture of the problem itself. A wealthy Victorian woman's morning dress routine took upward of 45 minutes and often required assistance. First came the linen shift, thin and protective, meant to shield expensive outer layers from skin. Then the corset, laced with such crushing force that medical records from the period document permanently reshaped rib cages, compressed organs, and chronic digestive issues. Doctors warned against it. Women did it anyway, because a 20-inch waist was worth the sacrifice of breathing comfortably. Over this foundation came the layers. 3 to 7 petticoats, each adding volume and weight. Then the true engineering marvel, the crinoline cage, a framework of spring steel hoops connected by vertical fabric tapes, creating a dome-shaped structure that made sitting down an act of careful negotiation and walking through doorways a calculated maneuver. The whole ensemble could weigh anywhere from 15 to 30 pounds, depending on the occasion. Special furniture had to be designed, chairs without arms, sofas with extra width, just to accommodate these walking monuments to fashion. Now, picture this. You're wearing all of this. You're at a garden party, a ball, a formal dinner, and nature calls. You cannot simply excuse yourself and return 10 minutes later. The logistics are staggering. The entire structure of your clothing is designed never to be removed in public, barely even in private without help. So what did Victorian women do? They became masters of improvisation, stealth, and a very particular piece of equipment that became as essential to their daily survival as the dresses themselves, the chamber pot. But not just any chamber pot. Women's chamber pots were specifically engineered for the challenge. Oval-shaped, not circular, the design was deliberate. The oval form could nestle more easily between layers of fabric and fit the natural contours of the body. Better quality models featured curved interiors and tight-fitting lids, not just for containing odor, but as a visual signal to household staff about their current status. Full or empty, urgent or routine. In wealthy homes, these essential items were hidden inside furniture designed for discretion. Elegant chairs concealed secret compartments beneath their cushions. Ornate cabinets disguised their true purpose behind beautiful woodwork. Some bedrooms featured elaborate night tables or commodes. The word literally means convenient, that looked like decorative furniture but housed chamber pots within arm's reach. Servants moved through these grand houses like phantoms, checking, emptying, and replacing these hidden systems throughout the day, their work so discreet that guests often had no idea they were even there. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. The actual process required physical coordination that bordered on performance art. A Victorian lady couldn't just lift her skirts. We're talking about potentially 20 pounds of fabric, steel framework, delicate lace, and expensive silk that could tear with one wrong move. Instead, she had to master a technique passed down from mother to daughter, practiced in private until it became second nature. The chamber pot would be positioned carefully beneath the voluminous skirts. Then, through a combination of strategic squatting, precise fabric arrangement, and an understanding of exactly how the crinoline cage moved and compressed, the entire operation could be completed without removing a single layer. The key was understanding the engineering. Crinoline cages were flexible by design. They compressed when you sat, expanded when you stood. Victorian women learned to manipulate this flexibility, using the spring steel hoops to create temporary access while maintaining the overall silhouette. It was ballet and architecture combined, performed in complete silence, often in dim light, with absolutely no room for mistakes. At formal events, the challenge escalated into coordinated operations. Grand homes and ballrooms featured retiring rooms, essentially Victorian bathroom lounges, staffed by ladies' maids who functioned like precision mechanics. These women were experts in the subtle art of assistance, positioning multiple layers of fabric, ensuring proper placement of the chamber pot, providing cleanup materials, and helping to rearrange everything afterward. The whole operation had to happen with such discretion that other guests wouldn't even notice a lady had stepped away. These maids knew things about their employers that would never, ever be spoken aloud. But here's the detail that might shock you most. For much of the Victorian era, many women didn't wear what we would recognize as underwear at all. The massive volume of petticoats and crinolines was considered sufficient coverage. The layers of fabric provided modesty, or so society believed. This worked fine until it didn't. Public incidents began accumulating. A strong gust of wind on a city street would catch those enormous skirts and flip the entire structure upward like an umbrella turning inside out. Suddenly, the secret was exposed. Nothing underneath but skin and stockings. These scandals became frequent enough that something had to change. The solution that emerged was revolutionary for its time: split crotch drawers. These weren't solid undergarments, but rather two separate pant legs connected only at the waistband, with a strategic opening in the middle. The design was pure genius. It provided coverage for modesty's sake, but allowed women to handle bathroom needs without removing or adjusting anything. The split construction meant that the entire chamber pot operation could proceed even more efficiently. Think about the implications. Victorian society was so rigid about propriety that women couldn't openly discuss bodily functions, yet so pragmatic that they engineered clothing specifically to accommodate those functions without ever acknowledging why. The contradiction was built into the very fabric of their undergarments. Now, let's talk about what happened after. Because using the chamber pot was only half the challenge. Cleaning up required materials that we take completely for granted today. Commercial toilet paper didn't become widely available until the 1880s, and even then it was considered a luxury item that refined people were too embarrassed to purchase openly. Early toilet paper was marketed in plain brown wrappers to spare customers the mortification of being seen buying it. So, what did Victorian women use? Whatever was available. In wealthy households, the preferred option was soft linen cloths, kept specifically for this purpose. These could be washed along with other household linens, though they were always washed separately by servants away from polite view. Less affluent families used old newspapers, catalog pages, corn cobs if available, or leaves when necessary. Some households kept boxes of soft fabric scraps, cut from worn-out clothing, which could be used and then washed and reused. The entire system required constant management and discretion from household staff who handled these intimate necessities while remaining invisible. But the monthly challenge of menstruation added yet another layer of complexity to an already complicated system. Victorian women managed their periods using homemade cloth pads secured with what was called a menstrual belt. Essentially, a cloth belt system worn around the waist and between the legs, holding absorbent materials in place. These materials varied widely: soft rags, cotton, moss, sheep's wool, or whatever absorbent natural substances were available. Women had to change these makeshift pads frequently throughout the day, sometimes 12 to 20 times during heavy flow days. Imagine the logistics. You're already wearing a corset, multiple petticoats, a crinoline cage, and an elaborate dress. Now add the need to change absorbent padding every few hours, all beneath those layers, often without assistance, always in complete silence. The physical and mental coordination required was extraordinary. And all of this had to be accomplished while maintaining perfect composure in public, never betraying discomfort, never acknowledging the challenge. Society's expectations of feminine propriety meant that menstruation was never discussed openly, even among women. Mothers taught daughters the necessary techniques in hushed, practical sessions, using euphemisms rather than direct language. The curse: being unwell, the monthly flowers. Any phrase but the actual medical term. This silence extended to medical care as well. Male doctors rarely examined women directly and often diagnosed female complaints, based solely on vague descriptions given through intermediaries. Women suffered in silence because speaking openly about their bodies was considered more shameful than enduring chronic health issues. The maintenance of Victorian clothing added another dimension to these challenges. Those elaborate dresses with their yards of fabric, intricate beadwork, and delicate materials couldn't be washed frequently. Most households only did major laundry twice a year during events called Great Wash Days, when the entire household's linens and washable items were cleaned in a massive multi-day operation. The expensive outer garments, those silk gowns and wool skirts, were rarely, if ever, fully washed. Instead, they were maintained through careful brushing, airing out, and the liberal application of powders designed to absorb odor and oils. The undergarments that actually came into contact with the body, the shifts, chemises, and later the split-crotch drawers, were washed much more frequently, sometimes weekly if resources allowed. These washable layers served as protection for the expensive outer garments and were considered essential for maintaining hygiene beneath those rarely cleaned elaborate dresses. The irony was striking. The most visible, expensive layers of clothing were also the dirtiest, while the hidden undergarments that nobody saw were kept meticulously clean. Public facilities presented yet another frontier of Victorian ingenuity and, frankly, horror. The garderobe system inherited from medieval times involved strategically placed openings in upper-story buildings that allowed waste to be disposed of directly onto the streets below. The famous warning cry, "Gardez l'eau," French for "watch out for the water," gave pedestrians a chance to dodge whatever was being emptied from above. In practice, this meant Victorian city streets were often running rivers of human waste, horse manure, and rotting garbage. The smell alone would be unimaginable to modern sensibilities. Here's a detail that sounds almost unbelievable but is well documented. Chamber pot contents weren't always considered mere waste. During wartime, government agents would actually collect urine because it could be processed into saltpeter, a crucial ingredient for making gunpowder. Your personal waste could literally help fuel military campaigns. Collection barrels were placed on street corners, and households were encouraged to contribute to the war effort in this distinctly unglamorous way. The social aspects of Victorian bathroom culture reveal yet another layer of complexity. Privacy, as we understand it today, simply didn't exist for most people. Families routinely used chamber pots in front of each other in shared bedrooms. At social gatherings, gentlemen would simply step into the garden to handle their needs among the flower beds. Discreet, but understood. Women, however, faced much stricter scrutiny. Their bathroom needs had to remain invisible. Their management of bodily functions had to appear effortless, and any acknowledgement of the physical realities beneath those elaborate dresses was social suicide. Yet, despite all these challenges, Victorian women maintained reputations for grace, elegance, and refinement that became legendary. They developed systems, techniques, and social protocols that allowed them to navigate daily challenges while upholding the strict standards of propriety that defined their era. The mental fortitude required was extraordinary. Imagine attending a formal dinner party, engaging in witty conversation, dancing gracefully, maintaining perfect posture, all while managing the physical discomfort of a tightly laced corset, the weight of your clothing, and the constant awareness that any bathroom emergency would require a complex logistical operation performed in secret. Victorian women developed their own underground networks of knowledge and support. Mothers taught daughters not just how to dress but how to survive in those dresses. Servants became keepers of intimate secrets, experts in the subtle art of assistance, knowing exactly how to help without drawing attention. Female friends developed coded language and discreet signals for communicating bathroom needs at social events without breaching the rules of polite conversation. A particular touch of a fan, a certain phrase, a glance toward a specific doorway. These small gestures carried urgent, practical meaning within a system that forbade direct communication. The economic impact of these clothing systems was enormous. Wealthy families employed teams whose primary job was maintaining the complex wardrobe requirements of the household's women. Laundresses, ladies' maids, and seamstresses all specialized in different aspects of keeping these elaborate clothing systems functional. A single Victorian lady of substantial wealth might require 3 or 4 servants dedicated solely to her wardrobe. One to dress and undress her, one to maintain and repair the clothing, one to manage the washing and pressing, and one to coordinate the overall wardrobe calendar. The amount of labor required just to keep one woman properly dressed was staggering. Interestingly, the very inconvenience of these clothing systems may have contributed to some positive social changes. The difficulty of managing such elaborate dress encouraged wealthy women to spend more time at home or in controlled social environments, which inadvertently led to increased focus on domestic arts, education, and intellectual pursuits. Unable to move freely or engage in physical activities, Victorian women turned to reading, writing, art, and music. Some historians argue that the impracticality of Victorian fashion actually pushed women toward more sedentary but intellectually engaging activities, creating space for female education and creative expression in an era that otherwise limited women's opportunities. The evolution away from these extreme fashion constraints didn't happen overnight. It took decades of gradual change, influenced by everything from bicycle riding becoming popular among women to the practical demands of World War I, which required women to take on more active roles in society. The enormous crinolines gradually gave way to bustles in the 1870s and 1880s, which then evolved into more practical skirt designs by the turn of the century. Each shift brought slightly more freedom of movement, slightly less restriction, though true comfort and practicality wouldn't arrive until well into the 20th century. But here's what stays with you. These women didn't just survive these challenges, they mastered them. They created elegant solutions to seemingly impossible problems. They developed techniques that allowed them to maintain dignity, health, and social standing while navigating some of the most impractical clothing ever designed by human hands. The legacy of Victorian ingenuity extends far beyond bathroom logistics. These women pioneered approaches to problem-solving, discretion, and social coordination that influenced everything from fashion design to social etiquette to the development of modern plumbing and sanitation systems. Their experiences, their daily struggles with basic human functions, directly contributed to the push for more practical clothing designs and better public health infrastructure. Reformers who campaigned for dress reform in the late Victorian era often cited health concerns and practical limitations as their primary arguments. The suffering was real, documented, undeniable, and it eventually sparked change. So the next time you effortlessly use a modern bathroom, slip into comfortable clothing, or handle any personal care routine with ease, remember the extraordinary journey that brought us here. The Victorian women who navigated these daily challenges with grace and determination paved the way for freedoms we now take completely for granted. Their story isn't quaint or amusing. It's a testament to human resilience in the face of constraints that seem almost deliberately cruel. They lived in cages of steel and silk. They breathed in shallow gasps. They planned their entire days around logistics that would break most of us within hours. And yet they moved through their world with such practiced elegance that outsiders saw only beauty, never the battles being fought beneath those magnificent skirts. That's the hidden truth of Victorian grace. It wasn't effortless. It was engineered, practiced, perfected through necessity and desperation. It was survival disguised as elegance, and it was sustained, day after impossible day, by women who refused to let their constraints define their dignity. They remembered, they adapted, they found a way, and in doing so, they created a legacy of human ingenuity that echoes far beyond the chamber pots and crinolines and coded language of a forgotten era. That's the story no painting can capture, the one that lived in whispered instructions and secret signals, and the quiet triumph of making it through another day with your composure intact and your secrets kept. They were warriors in silk, and history should remember them that way.